All right, it is now almost 3:15, about 3:14, and I will call the Cuyahoga County Council Operations, Intergovernmental Relations, and Public Transportation Committee to order. Clerk, will you please take the roll?
Good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to say as a reminder to all in attendance, this meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the county YouTube page. Calling the roll, Ms. Baker.
Here.
Ms. Simon. Mr. Sweeney.
Present.
Mr. Miller.
Here.
Mr. Schrein is absent. You have a quorum.
Thank you. Any public comments?
Yes, Madam Chair, we received a public comment via email from Mr. Chris Martin regarding public transportation for Cuyahoga County residents. We also have public comment within the, who is in attendance is Ms. Liu.
Ms. Liu, if you'd like to come forward.
Good afternoon. Glad to be here. This meeting, we have not been able to have the new meeting again. I'm very looking forward to today's presentation. And definitely, I always support our Inspector General. I know the report will come up later. However, I just heard a previous meeting, which was very informative as well. So we know our county jail will be bigger, but yes, the problem here is bigger is not to just put more people in there. If we learn something about COVID-19, we know we have been neglected public safety connecting to public health issues. So this is the same thing even in homeless shelter, group home, nursing home, same situation. Having a bigger facility is not to stuff more people, the disadvantaged people. Same thing here. If we talk about our public transportation, it is for everybody. Don't think it is only for poor people. It's for everybody who has a need and who has a desire, who wants our environment better. It's also a public health issue. This is the reason why today I'm bringing in documents from this group called Clevelanders for Public Transit. 3 years ago, they had a very good platform called Fair Fares. This time, they changed the format to have a new edition. So I would like all the members here to take a look of it. You can critique, you can think about it. Lots of good points in there are related. If we can establish good public policies on it, that will be very helpful to all our residents in Cuyahoga County and like thrive with health. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. And we are in receipt of Mr. Martin's email also. All right. If you've had a chance to look at the March 30th minutes, may I have a motion to approve?
Second. Motion, I should say.
I move
Second.
We have it
First.
moved by
First Simon, second.
Simon and second by Mr. Sweeney. Thank you for that. All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Hearing no nays, the minutes are approved. So there are no matters related to committee, but we do have an anticipated presentation that we've been waiting for a while, and with all that's been going on, we're very interested in hearing from our Director Houston on the Internal Audit Annual Report. So welcome to committee, and please proceed.
Thank you. I'm Monica Houston, the Director of Internal Audit. My tenure commenced as the Director in November of 2019. To the Chair, Councilwoman Baker, Vice Chair, Councilwoman Simon, and other esteemed council members of the COIT Committee, thank you for the opportunity to present the annual update to Council for the Internal Audit Department. Joining me today from the Internal Audit Committee are Keith Lippman and Yvette Etu, and of course, the council appointee, Trevor McNair, is also in the room, as well as my esteemed colleague, Joshua Alt, our audit manager.
Welcome.
Thank you. Today, we'd like to discuss just a few things with you. We won't take up much of your time. We did send the report in advance, and hopefully you have had an opportunity to read through it. So today we're going to discuss the purpose of the audit committee and its current members, as well as the evaluation of the committee's performance in 2020. We're going to discuss the Department of Internal Audit's highlights in 2020, continuing monitoring process that we now perform, as well as the Department of Internal Audit's performance statistics. The Audit Committee. The purpose of the Audit Committee for the Cuyahoga County Audit Committee is established pursuant to Article 11, Section 1101 of the Cuyahoga County Charter. This body provides internal auditing to assist the county executive, fiscal officer, the county council, and other county officers and departments funded in whole or in part by county funds. The goal of the Audit Committee is to provide efficient and effective services to the county residents. The Audit Committee provides direction and guidance to the county's Department of Internal Audit, including establishing and amending relevant rules and operations. The Audit Committee members will participate in the hiring process of certain key positions. The County Audit Committee meets quarterly and oversees internal and external audits. Currently, we have 7 members of the Audit Committee as per the charter. There are 5 members on this charter that are what we call voting members. They consist of the county council's president, which the appointee is Trevor McNair for the council president. And then we have 4 independent members. Those members are of our local body of citizens who have volunteered their time to serve on the committee. We also have serving with us Michael Chambers, the CFA, as well as the county executive, Armin Budish. They are non-voting members on the county. Audit committee requirements. The county charter, the audit committee charter requires the committee to conduct and review with the council an evaluation of the committee's performance under the audit committee charter and the charter of Cuyahoga County. So for 2020, we sent in the report. Located on pages 4 to 7 of the report are all of the compliance items in which we looked at for 2020. There were 18 items in which there was full compliance for the audit committee charter, as well as 3 items where there was full compliance that were relative to the charter of Cuyahoga County. Any questions on those items? And they're located again, page 4 through 7.
I don't think on those pages there are any questions.
No questions. Okay, great. So I'll move on. So DIA, the Department of Internal Audit, has an audit process, and for 2020, our audit process consisted of the, you get to a certain age, you need glasses. So we start off first by identifying a department or a function through our audit plan. The audit committee does approve our audit plan on an annual basis. Once we've identified a department or function to be audited, we then do a pre-meeting with that particular entity. We conduct that pre-meeting, telling them what the scope of the work is going to be, what our deadlines and timelines are, obtaining any information and feedback that we need, and requesting initial information and documentation that will help us with our planning. We then move to the audit planning and field work, where we are then scoping out in detail the steps that we're going to perform in order to achieve the objectives of the audit. Once those objectives have been determined, we then perform the work, which is considered our field work. One of the things that we have done in 2020 that was different from prior years is that we developed a process that during the time of the audit of field work, we come up with what we call control conditions. Those control conditions are findings that would result in audit findings in the report. So the control condition forms are actually discussed and socialized with management during the course of the field work. So we don't wait to the end of the audit to let them know what's going on. Thank you so much. It's really this mask. Oh, it's hard to breathe and talk through this.
Yes, it is.
So thank you. Oh, much better. As I was saying, we came up with the control condition form process to help expedite the audit process and do a no surprise type of audit. We believe in no surprises. We also want to get management enough time to provide their responses to any issues or concerns prior to the report being released. At the end of our field work, we then draft an audit report and share that audit report with management. Subsequent to that, we then hold a post-audit meeting where we discuss any further issues, final timing of the release of the report, any concerns. Thereafter, we obtain management's responses within a 30-day period. We then, therefore, after issue the report to the audit committee for their review. The audit committee reviews, and if they have no objections or concerns with issuing the report, they give their approval. Once they give their approval, the report is distributed to the county management as well as the council, and it's posted to the website. Thereafter, we perform what we call our follow-up process, and here is another change than for 2020 that wasn't there before, is we no longer do follow-up audits. We used to do follow-up audits in order to follow up on the issues that were identified in the report. We now have a contemporaneous, continuous monitoring process that we'll talk about later that we do instead. So that's our audit process for 2020. So let's talk about our DI highlights for 2020. So 2020, what an unprecedented year for everyone, including internal audit. Our work, like many's, was impacted. We really depend upon other departments in order to do our work. And so if they don't have availability in which to respond to our audit requests, we can't do our work. And of course, many departments were strapped for resources and we're focusing on critical functions during the pandemic, as was internal audit. We had some resource issues or concerns. So we didn't get a lot done in terms of issuing out a lot of audit reports. What we did get done, however, is we concluded on audits that had already been started in the year prior for 2019. So for 2019, we had already started on the juvenile court cash collection audit, as well as the juvenile court ancillary services and grants audit. We issued those reports on 6/15 of 2020. We also started at the end of 2019, and it went into 2020, the IT inventory report, and we issued that report on 8/5 of 2020. We had several recommendations. Those recommendations will be followed up on in our new management process. There was some minor recoveries. Internal audit goes far beyond savings and recoveries, though. A lot of what we're doing now is controls and helping entities to understand what controls are, what risks are, how they would effectively and efficiently manage the resources that are in their care. So this goes a little bit beyond the savings and recoveries that we have been noted to find in the past. So any questions thus far? Okay, for page 9 in your report shows the details of these particular audits. For cash collections, we basically had some segregation of duties issues relative to cash handling. We also had some issues with the iCase software. For ancillary services and grants for juvenile court, and I just want to make a note here, juvenile court is not, per the charter, an entity that most courts don't fall underneath our jurisdiction for audit. But we have a collaborative relationship with juvenile court, and they allowed us to perform these audits. And we're very receptive in responding to any issues that were found. So for the ancillary services and grants, there was an underreporting of CFR amounts. And that was an issue that was net versus gross. That actually came up in the audit report, the external audit report as well. So they have corrected that issue. I know that they've corrected that issue because of the work that we do for the financial audit. For IT inventory, that was mainly a case of them just getting new policies and procedures and being aware of inventory reporting processes and how they should best handle things and track software. And just, again, we had never audited this particular entity, so they just were not aware of a lot of the things that they should be doing in order to protect our assets in terms of the IT inventory assets. No huge significant issues, but just some process procedure type issues that they are handling, as well as segregation of assets, which they was physical safeguarding of some assets, which they have also taken care of. So those were the DI highlights for the engagements.
May I ask you, Director?
Sure.
I held off on those 2 points until you got to them. So good to hear that the juvenile court, those services have been rectified. Now, you mentioned that you will not do a follow-up audit with them, or will you? Just to make sure that things are in place as you hope they should be.
It's an excellent question. We are not actually performing follow-up audits, but we are tracking the issues and making sure that the issues are resolved according to the action plans in which management has provided to us. In some instances, we will do follow-up. We will, if we're doing a review in that area, we will incorporate those issues in that review. But right now, everything is tracked on a contemporaneous monitoring basis, which we'll talk about in detail later on in the presentation.
All right, and I guess too with the IT inventory audit, security was brought to our attention by the administration earlier, that was something that he felt was important, and I see you have also now taken a look at the cybersecurity framework and the formal asset policy that you think needs to be perhaps strengthened. Again, I guess I would ask that, because that was never audited before, it sounds like, that you would go back to that and make sure that what is in place is adequate for what you feel should be in place. Is that?
Yes, so one of the things that we are now doing with our audit reports, which you will see when you get the audit reports, is we put priority ratings on each finding. And those items you're talking about were P1s.
Okay.
And any P1s that are there, we always go back and we don't do a full follow-up audit, but we do the work that we would normally do in that audit. So we're going to go back and we're going to check and we're going to validate and we're going to confirm that what they say that they were doing to address those issues, they're actually doing. So it's auditing without doing a full-blown report. So it helps us to get through these issues and track them more timely and more progressively and on a continuous basis, rather than waiting a year or two down the road to get to them. We're monitoring them every month.
That makes sense, that you're targeting what it is you've spent the time on.
Absolutely.
That makes perfect sense, and good to hear.
And it helps us with use of our resources because
also
we're now
have
leveraging some other resources.
Absolutely. You also have notated here the ERP implementation team on reviewing the segregation of duties for modules and security testing. So that, I don't believe I've heard that done before. Is that also something new that you've brought into your team?
So actually, no, that was being done as part of the ERP process before I got here. So one of the things that our IT analyst was doing was working very closely with the ERP team to, as they were, because we had done a lot of work up front, is my understanding before I got here, to ensure that there was appropriate segregation of duties in all of the different modules, particularly the procurement, the contracting module.
Okay.
And so when they have questions or concerns relative to segregation of duties issues, a lot of times they will bring those issues back before audit to see if there is a conflict there, or, with the assignment of the different levels of access that they're wanting to do. So that process is really managed by fiscal, but there is an audit advisory that we're using our IT analysts to do to advise on.
All right, and talking of procurement, and I know my colleague and I who serve on Board of Control, it seems that it's become more the norm than the not. And of course, with COVID, it has just complicated, but even before COVID, it has been an issue, and that is the lateness sometimes of the contracts that are brought before us. Sometimes they could be 6 months into the year, and we backtrack it in approving. Of course, nothing's been spent until that contract's approved, but there are vendors waiting for their money, even though services have been provided. Is that part of your, are you looking at that at all as to, and I understand, like I said, that COVID has complicated and slowed everything down, and that has to be taken into consideration. But I think there, even before in 2019, we were asking many of the same questions.
Yes.
So where are you on that?
So Councilwoman Baker, I do remember and recall us having that conversation in 2019. And as we do, we work very closely with the Inspector General's office so that we don't duplicate our services. And so I reached out to the Inspector General at that time, and my understanding is that they were going to be doing some detail work in that area. So we stand ready to help the Inspector General in that area.
If we can,
I will
Put on your
definitely follow
radar.
back up. I'll bring it back up.
right,
Absolutely,
and you're right.
but yes,
The Inspector General is the lead on this.
yes, that is correct.
But it doesn't hurt to have the
Not at all.
auditor and,
I'll make a note to
involved.
make sure that I follow up again.
And if I'm not out of line, on page 12, the recommendation status summary, there's 14% here that is not completed or partially implemented. Any concern about that, of getting these departments on task to make sure that what is you're recommending is being done?
And that's page 14 of which report?
12 of 13.
12 of the, oh, yes, okay, so yeah. So what we do, so this is kind of, we were going to talk about this a little later, but,
Okay, I don't want to
oh, yeah,
interrupt your
but we will
sequence.
definitely address that question.
Okay, then
Yeah.
we can wait.
Yeah.
Any questions until we proceed? We're good. All
Okay.
right, then please continue.
All right. So in addition to the engagements, we did do our final follow-up audit. This audit was already in process. It had started, actually, I think it got started in 2018, late 2018, early 2019, and it finished up in 2020. But it was the follow-up to the Sheriff's Civil Division audit that was performed in 2017. So we went back as a full audit and looked at the different, it was 133 recommendations out of that report. Fully implemented was 105, partially implemented was 8, not implemented at all was 8, and withdrawal was 12. And this is a very good example of why the process that we do now is a much improved process, because this got done in 2017. By the time we got around to doing the follow-up work, a lot of the recommendations were still out of date. And so for it to be very useful and add more value, you want to do it in a more timely manner. So that's what but we did close out that work, and we did issue that report on 4/4 of 2020.
So are you saying the report for the Sheriff's Civil Division audit has met to your satisfaction and they are complete, or?
Yeah, so for that particular report, yes. We've done some subsequent work for the sheriffs, like recently, that you'll be getting very shortly. The sheriff asked us to come in and do some work, and some of that does tangent off of the work that was done previously. Okay. So also in 2020, we had some additional work that we did, which is we started on several new audits. We started on the Accounts Payable Benefits Law audit, the Homeless Services audit, the Capital Projects audit, the Medical Examiner's Office audit, the Child Support Payment Process audit, and the Juvenile Court IT General Controls Review. All of those reports have been issued to you. I do believe you have all the reports except for the Juvenile Court IT General Controls Review. That was actually work that was solicited from the Juvenile Court Administrator for internal use only. And so they did not issue that as an external report. Okay.
Yes, go ahead, Councilman.
Madam Chair, to the auditor, on the capital projects report, what was the purpose of that audit and what did you find?
Ooh. So that was an audit that was kind of cross-cutting against a lot of different areas. We looked at the airport, we looked at facilities management. It was related to anything that's considered to be a capital project for Cuyahoga County. We actually looked at sewer, but we ruled them out because a lot of the funding from them comes from particular cities and entities, and there wasn't much risk from a county perspective on that. We found that there was some need for improvement, but overall, we found that the controls were solid, that they do a good job. There, of course, again, another entity that had not been audited. So, of course, there, some items relative to process and procedures, pretty much, is what we found. No significant or major issues relative to how they capture capital projects for the airport, for facilities.
So, Madam Chair, to the auditor, the county's financial policies require the county to maintain an inventory of its capital stock. Do you know whether, in fact, we do that?
You do. You do.
Okay, thank you.
If I may, on that same line, you have also listed HHS Homeless Services. That's been elevated over the last 6 months, I guess, as to the difficulties that have been put in place. And I know it's not the norm, it's the unusual. Did your report reflect that also, or?
We did not. When we looked at it, we didn't look at what was currently going on. We look at the processes in place. And so audit is somewhat a backward-looking process. So we did not. However, what I can say is one of the things that I recall from there is that they were very short-staffed. And at that point in time, they actually had a retirement of a tenured employee. Most of the employees are very tenured. And, they were used to doing a lot of things just because everybody knew what to do. So again, another area where policies and procedures were lacking. But overall, from what I can recall and remember, that to me was the one thing that stuck out, was that they were very short-resourced.
And finally, the medical examiner's office, does that refer to the report that we discussed just earlier?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So perhaps just, I was mentioning to my colleagues, there were a few red flags there that seemed worth at least commenting on. In
Sure.
discussing it with you, it sounds like we've got it managed and handled, but could you
Definitely.
just briefly?
Yes, I can definitely share what I've shared with you with your colleagues.
Sure.
So pretty much that process, we looked at the annual statistical report that is issued by the county medical examiner and has been done for 80 years. There are two parts to that process. There is the actual reporting part, and then the underlying units that actually provide the detail up into the reporting report. What we found overall is that, again, because there was no audit, they weren't aware of their responsibility for policies, procedures, making sure controls in place, again, educating people on risk and policies, procedures, and controls. There were very few controls at the reporting level. However, we did go down to the secondary level, which is what we call the transaction level, where all the information is being fed into the reporting process, and controls existed at that level. And we were pleased with the controls. There were some system controls from an ITGC perspective that brought some concern, but they're going to be addressing those. But overall, the controls existed at the lower level, so that when they were brought up to the higher level, we found no instances where there was inaccuracies in reporting of the statistical information. However, the risk is present since there are not any controls at that higher level.
So your recommendation was to
put controls in place and to develop policies and procedures, which they were right on point and agreed with.
And again,
doing.
We
will follow up. It'll be fed into our follow-up process that we're going to talk about in a few minutes.
the P1, as you said.
Yes. So they had several P1s.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome. So also in 2020, any other questions? Okay. So we had some non-audit related highlights, and one of the ones that we had was this continuous audit follow-up process. So that was a process in and of itself. It took quite a few hours for us to do because we wanted to go back and scrub all of the old audits and make sure all of the findings from the old audits didn't get lost. So we went back, we looked at them. Any that were stale dated, we just made sure that they were stale dated and we dismissed them. But anything that was still appropriate, we included in our tracking log. We also reviewed, we also revised and completed an annual risk assessment for the 2021 audit plan. Now, this assessment was a little bit different. We do an annual risk assessment for use in determining what our audit plan is going to be, but what we did this year is what we call a deep dive. The deep dive consists of an end-to-end review of specific risk, priority, focus area, or concern. The risk area went beyond the traditional level review and considered all the moving parts. So this was like what we call a deep dive to make sure that we had all of our risk identified and that we were appropriately identifying things that might be of risk and of concern and appropriately managing that into our audit plan. So basically, our audit plan is a risk-based audit plan, and we use this risk assessment to help us determine what items we're going to audit for the next year.
Is this how those that you've analyzed, is that how they rose to the top?
Correct. They were high, yes. And other services provided during 2020 to Assist County Management were help with the external financial audit. We worked very closely with the fiscal audit team in managing the external financial audit. We meet regularly on a regular basis, and we help to ensure that action plans are in place for any findings that come out of that audit as well. We also report back to the audit committee. They keep their hand on the pulse of what's going on for the financial audit, and we're that lifeline to help them become informed about what's going on. We also did identification and advisement on emerging risk during the COVID process. So there were a lot of things that management was contending with during that process that audit was involved and engaged with and may have said, hey, you might want to consider this, or, this might put risk there. You might want to consider this item or that item. So we did that in 2020 as well. So here comes this continuous audit follow-up process that we've been talking about. So I'm going to kind of walk you through the process so that you have a better understanding. So as we mentioned and talked about, issues are identified in the audit. Once an audit issue has been identified, we take that action plan that was contained or obtained in the audit report and documented in the report, and we put that issue, we add it to what we call the issue tracker spreadsheet. So there's a huge spreadsheet that we keep, it's almost like a database of all open issues that come out of each and every report. So each report that you get, when you see a recommendation and you see a P1, a P2, or P3 by it, all of those items go into this tracker base. It gets assigned to a specific person who's responsible for resolving that issue. And then if it's an agency issue, if it's an executive agency issue, Executive Budish has been gracious enough to assign to us what we call an audit liaison. That's Catherine Tkachik. And she will work with management to resolve all issues, all open issues. So she has access to this database, and on a monthly basis, she is checking with management to see that they are resolving these issues. So as I said, it's contemporary, it's continuous, it's happening all the time. So we're not waiting till we come do an audit for somebody to be saying, hey, what's going on with this? Did you do what you said you were going to do? Catherine is doing that on behalf of the executive agency all the time. If it's for something like juvenile that is not part of the executive agency, we actually manage that. Our internal team will be talking with those people on a monthly basis.
If Catherine has issues with a director or can't get maybe the timeline's not being met, or other things perhaps are more important in that department in their opinion, do you then step in and get involved, or?
We don't. I mean, she actually will talk with Executive Budish and get him involved and engaged. And that's the whole reason for it, is to make sure that they are. But she's been very good. We've worked with her on many issues, and it's been very successful. So once that happens, the agency's audit liaison updates the status monthly, and then internal audit performs the follow-up testing, and that's what we're talking about. So based upon the priority, the P1, the P2, the P3, we will determine what we need to do in order to close that item out. If it's a P1, we're going to do actual test work. So if they say that they had an action plan that addressed this, we're going to go and say they said that they were going to put this particular control in place. We're going to go look and test that control and make sure that it is actually in place. So we're doing the audit work that we would normally do in a follow-up. We're doing it on a quarterly basis.
It sounds like a good process.
Okay. So then there's a bi-monthly meeting that happens with the agency audit liaison, where we discuss any issues. If there's a problem with something being open, if it's past the deadline, we discuss all of that. She gives us an update. Once we are aware of all updates and that everything's been updated and we've done our work to close out whatever needs to be closed out, the items are closed, or the status update is updated as appropriate in the issue tracker spreadsheet. That then gets formulated into a report that's called the semi-annual report, and that report is provided to the audit committee on a semi-annual basis and to this committee on an annual basis. So attached to your report, and I'm going to have Joshua, our audit manager, who manages this process, to come and talk to you briefly, but attached to your report after page 13 is actually the semi-annual status report that was provided to the audit committee at the second quarter meeting.
Looks like a very detailed report, very tiny.
It is, yes.
Difficult to read.
So that report being, I believe it's like 60 pages, if I remember correctly. However, it does list every single open issue that we have on the report. The first few pages are summarized to give you some of that detail. So as Monica mentioned, this is as of the first half of 2021. And at that point, we had 151 issues that we were tracking. That crossed 9 different audits that covered departments, including finance, IT, HHS, and juvenile court. The first table within the issue tracker report itemizes the count of each issue by risk level, high, medium, low, which is also affiliated with the P1, the P2, the P3. It also itemizes based on closed or open. So everything that's closed on that report, excuse me, is what we have actually gone back, tested, and deemed to be, they've remediated the issue itself. The remaining is, the open issues is what we still have left to test. Now, I realize that if you look at these counts, for like, as an example, the high risk. So we closed 4, we still have 34 open. Now, that seems high, however, just with these being somewhat recent audits, that the departments, they need lead time before they can actually implement something, and then we have to actually have transactions to test. So it's basically a runway effect. So we need a little bit of time to get to them. Our target is to test all high issues within 1 year and all the moderate and lows within a 2-year time period.
May I ask a question on that?
Sure.
So it looks like, of course, your eye goes to the high first. The process IT contracts, half of those were part of your 41. So that looks like where you've concentrated for the most part in the IT. Am I reading that correctly? Grand total 19 for process IT contracts.
Oh, yes, I apologize.
So 18 of those were moderate, which I'm not quite sure what that means, but one of them was high. Have you resolved those?
Yes, the top portion where it says closed, those are the ones that we actually have closed.
Okay,
It's
so all of those, oh, okay.
Yes, so all of those have been closed. However, the portion underneath that's open, that's what's still remaining to test, which the same audit is reflected down there, and there are still 13 highs to go after.
Right, and that is different than what was identified above it?
Correct, yes.
So, I don't have any benchmark to know whether 13 is a lot for process IT or Department of Information Technology IT inventory at 13. I mean,
Well, yeah.
how do you gauge this, and how much of a red flag is it for us as overseers to understand what
Yeah,
that means?
absolutely. Now, that was a rather large and lengthy report. If you total them up, the open and closed issues with that particular audit looks like about 47. So it was quite a lot identified in that. So when there is that volume of findings, it does take some time to remediate. So we are monitoring, like Monica said, on a bi-monthly basis, just to check the progress on each and every issue.
Is there anything in that? I mean, we have 13 for contracts and another 13 for IT inventory. Anything there that we should be concerned about that you have under high? And we're also high on the closed reports, that this is a new
I don't
item?
believe so. By all means, we could always provide copies of the reports, which are also on the county website, to, and discuss anything that you might have concerns with.
Joan Baker. So the contract IT ones, we had a hold on quite a bit of those because they were underneath that whole litigation issue. But now that that's been resolved, we can now go freely do our work. We held off on doing some work because we didn't, in talking with legal, it was best for us to kind of just wait and see what happened with the outstanding cases that were in the courts at the time. Now that those have been resolved, we can go ahead and finish and do our work. So that's why they're kind of still open. But it was from that IT procurement audit that was kind of that infamous one, is where most of those IT contract audits came from.
Is that a relatively high number, or is that a reasonable number?
So to your question, it's a little bit difficult to say. What I will say is when you have high items, it means high risk. And I will just kind of caution you, because most of when you talk about the audit coverage over the county, internal audit is a relatively young department. We've been in existence from 2013, but we haven't done a whole lot of audits throughout the county. We're working with the audit committee. The audit committee has given direction for us to increase that and try to get more to more areas of our auditable population. As we go through and people actually understand risk, they actually understand that they should have controls, as we educate people, that should be coming down. But you are going to see some areas, unfortunately, where there are high risks that are not being addressed. But it's just the nature of what we have when you have a relatively ripe audit population where there just has been no audit work. And there's just not a lot of knowledge out there as to what they should be doing. But what we have found in all of the audits that I have done since we've been here is that management is definitely willing to learn and to address all issues.
In your next report, would you have these perhaps up in the closed?
Yeah, so we're working on it now, and he can talk to you. This is definitely, we moved the barometer on this quite a
Okay,
bit.
well, I appreciate your clarity. Makes sense.
Yes, it has. Like I said earlier, this is as of activity for the first half of the year. So we've continued on. I believe right now we're kind of at if I remember right, the 61 mark as opposed to 41 issues
Okay.
closed. So we are making progress. With that, I will also say, we have released several reports, which is going to up that number.
Good to know. I don't remember seeing anything like this before. I don't have a reference of what high, moderate, or low means. I mean, I don't know if 16's high or 50's high, or or if 2 is high. So we'll know the next time you bring this report to us where these numbers have changed and hopefully lowered.
You will actually see a comparative
Okay.
that will help, and we're working on putting that together
Good.
for the audit committee.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Any questions so far? Doing good? All right. Please continue.
Okay. So performance statistics, which is our last area on the agenda. So pretty much from 2013, the department has been in existence from 2013 until current. And historically, they've tracked this number for you, and I just want to preface this by saying the value of audit goes way beyond the potential cost savings and identified recoveries. But because this had been reported to you in the past, we wanted to at least report it one more time, but to let you know that this is a KPI that it does provide some insight, but maybe not the best insight to the value of internal audit. So what you'll see is from 2013 to 2020, we had department expenditures totaling over $4 million with over $12 million in cost recoveries, and that translates into effectively a 31% annual calculated rate of return of DIA services since 2013. You know, our audit committee member, Keith Lippman, brought this to my attention, and rightfully so. You know, depending on the work that's done, if we do strategic reviews, if we do compliance reviews, there may not be any cost recoveries. Doesn't mean it's not the value to internal audit. So just wanted to make sure we said that to you. Any questions thus far?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Go right ahead.
So could you put that slide back up, please?
Sure.
So for 2013, 2016, and 2017, there was substantial cost savings. And in the heading, it refers to these as potential cost savings and recoveries identified. We're now some years out. We're at least 4 years out from 2017 and longer from the earlier ones. My question is whether those potential cost savings in fact have been realized, or whether the actual cost savings are lower amounts.
I don't know, because that is not information that's tracked, which may be another supportive item to whether or not, you know, this is a KPI we need to continue going forward, because we do not go back to see whether they are actually realized. And sometimes it is based upon, like you said, potential cost savings, and that's if the department actually implements a specific strategy. They have no requirement to implement that. But then also it can be based on actual recoveries identified, and that may be, you know, if they were to go back and maybe recover certain things, but there might be some limitations as to whether or not they can recover it, because again, we're backward looking. So sometimes by the time we do our audit work, they may or may not be able to actually realize those recoveries. So I cannot say at this point in time, because we did not track to see.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right.
So lastly, the other performance statistics that has been reported out historically was the audited departments in terms of the implementation of the recommendations. So overall, from 2013, there were 21 audits completed and 9 follow-ups done on those 21 audits completed. Based upon the follow-ups, there was a 67% of those recommendations were implemented, but that of the recommendations that were made between 2013 and 2020 were implemented. And again, as I said, we will no longer do formal follow-up reviews. So this KPI, this would be the last year that you probably will see this KPI. We will see it in another way, which will be through the report that we just provided to you. But there was 67% implemented, and 10% partially implemented, 4% not implemented, and closed or withdrawn was 19%.
So that was my question earlier, the 10 plus 4 not implemented and partially implemented, that will be part of your going back as a review, but not a full audit to make sure that what was suggested is being followed through? Is that what
So
you do
let
with
me,
that 14%?
let me explain how those got captured. So when we first did we switched from the audit follow-up process to the continuous monitoring process. We went back and we looked at all of the open audits that had issues, which some of these may have been part of this, not implemented, partially implemented. Depending upon the relative issue or concern, whether we considered it to be an issue that was still present or whether if it was still dated, we closed it out. Anything that was relevant got put onto the report that was just discussed and will be followed up on according to that process.
And are these what Catherine would be involved in?
Yes, correct. Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Any questions up till now?
And so that is it.
Yeah, one question, Councilman Miller.
Yes, you mentioned about KPIs. What does KPI stand for?
Key Performance Index
Huh?
or indicator.
Okay, and finally, I would just like to thank you for all this nitpicking but important work. It's something that the county really needs to monitor what we're doing and continuously improve. But it's painstaking work, and I just appreciate the effort and thank you for your service.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to serve.
And also to the rest of your staff.
I thank you, and we will definitely make sure that they hear from the council your appreciation.
Especially under these very difficult times, it's hard for all of us to try and get our work done and still follow many of the health mandates that are put in place
Absolutely.
for everyone's protection.
And we have a wonderful audit team, so thank you for allowing us to serve.
The only piece that wasn't mentioned, and I'm not sure, I would think that your paths would cross with the Inspector General when he highlights something that he works on, especially when he's worked on it for a number of years, and I think has drawn to a conclusion, but that's the economic development loan and process. Those are dollars that are involved in that process.
Yes.
And so it becomes part of their budget and overall scope of what they do. So what was your involvement, if any, in that? And can you bring closure to that?
So we did not have, since I've been here, any specific involvement in it. However, we do look at that area as part of our risk assessment. And the work that is done by the Inspector General is given consideration in the work that we do. Again, we try not to overlap. So, but we are aware of the concern, and we keep our pulse on what's happening from a risk perspective there through our risk assessment process. And if it were to kind of blip into a level of high, based upon the resources that internal audit currently has, we can only cover what we consider to be high areas, and we don't really have the adequate personnel to cover all highs. So that one, I believe, is actually a moderate per our risk assessment. So our goal, what we're working towards, is try to get coverage of all areas within a 2 to 5 year period, but we do have a way to go to get there.
All right, well, good. Just curious to know your involvement on that. If there aren't any other questions, we appreciate your presentation, and as Councilman Miller said, we appreciate your work, your team's work. It has to be done and keeps us all honest and understanding of the processes here.
Well, thank you again for the opportunity. All right.
So is there any miscellaneous business that anyone would like to announce?
Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Councilman Miller.
As one who just wrote RTA yesterday, I just want to call everybody's attention to Chris Martin's public comment. Public transportation vitally intersects with what the county does. it's important for both economic development and for equity. And in his testimony, among other things, he suggested that we might, from time to time, ask the RTA trustees that we have appointed to come to our committee and update us and talk about the issues being worked on at RTA. So I just put that out there as something that we could think about. Thank you.
Right, and I agree. RTA, transportation is very important for public use. We do have transportation as part of this committee. I'm not quite sure, what more we can do that RTA is responsible for, and we certainly don't want to overstep ourselves with them. But I don't see where it can't hurt if we wanted to bring in those that we appointed to that board to come before us and perhaps give us an update of what RTA is doing and some of the concerns that they're dealing with. But it needs to be clear that this is, we are not responsible for the funding. We're not responsible. They need to put the responsibility where it lies, and that's with the RTA board. But if there is a desire by this body that they would like to hear from those that we appoint to get an update and so that we're knowledgeable about what it is that's being worked on, certainly that can't hurt. And I would put that out there for those to come before us if they would like to. We'll schedule a time. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. All right, if there's no other business, may I have a motion to adjourn? Do I have a second? Second? Everyone agree that we are adjourning? Say aye. Aye. No nays, we are adjourned. Thank you.